What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your co-host Donovan Quick, and before we get started today, go ahead and check out the green gridiron. The link is in our description below. You can get little helmets like that, or you can get even life-size helmets, custom helmets. You can think of it, they probably have it helmet-wise in the description below. Go check out their link. Great company to work with. We do love them a lot. All right, getting into this video, we're going to be talking about how the Dolphins having Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier on the hot seat is either going to really push us from maybe fringe a playoff team to actual contender, or it's going to castrate us for the next 3 years and it's going to be just wait until 2028. That being said, all right, we're going to talk about the more optimistic side more first, and then we'll get into the castration. All right, so the optimistic side, we know that they know the major issue on this team is the offensive line. They know it. They addressed it in the offseason or in the postseason press conference, where they were basically like, "Yeah, we know we're going to address it, and they're going to get it done." And look, Mike McDaniel, Chris Grier, they've meanwhile haven't really made any big moves right now. They did restructure both Teron Armstead and Bradley Chubb, and not like pushing money down the road restructure. They took pay cuts, and that is your leaders of your locker room on both sides of the ball buying into the culture. And I think on top of that, having, first place in the Players Association pool of like what teams are great to their players, I think that helps as well going into the offseason. But Mike McDaniel having that trust of his players to be like, yeah, you know what, I'll take a pay cut just for you. I'll do it. Now, I don't know exactly what Bradley Chubb's pay cut is, but Teron Armstead, he's taking the vet minimum. It's still to be determined whether he plays or not. I think he kind of wants to see what exactly we do with our team, with our roster, because if he believes that if we could compete, he says he has the money. It's not about the money for him. It's about, his family, and then does he think he can go out and win a championship? So if this is a team that we put together that he thinks can go out and win a chip, and he comes back on the vet minimum, that's incredible. Now, if he retires on the vet minimum, it's still really great of him to do that, because that if he retired on his old contract, we would be somewhere between $8 and $12 million against the cap that we just could not have access to it, whereas now we do, no matter what, whether he plays or doesn't play. So to have that trust of your leaders in your locker room to do that, and for them to do that for you, for your team, that's incredible. Now that's the start of my optimism. That's the start of it. As we go on, they know the problems of the offensive line. They said they're going to address it. Now, there has been moves made for offensive linemen already this offseason by the Bears. They have been very aggressive with getting their offensive linemen. I'm hoping to see the same thing from Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel as the offseason starts to roll around and free agency starts and the draft comes around. I want to see us address the offensive line, not just thoroughly, but aggressively. I want us to aggressively attack the offensive line and build it up. I do like Patrick Paul. I really do. We need interior. We need a guard. We need two guards. We need a backup swing tackle, because if Patrick Paul is starting on our left side and Austin Jackson is starting on our right side, Austin Jackson has missed the second half of the last 2 seasons with different injuries. And look, they're freak injuries. They happen. But he was also pretty injury prone before McDaniel got here. So we need a swing tackle that can back up Austin Jackson and Patrick Paul if Teron Armstead does not come back. So they need to aggressively address the offensive line. And I think that alone is going to propel us into being a really good football team, because in 2023, I said this, the fall off wasn't people knowing what we're going to do. I mean, given we didn't really beat any, first place teams or winning record teams that season. But we didn't really play that many. And the ones that we did, when we played them at the end of the season, we got crushed. And let me tell you why. At the end of the 2023 season, we were down 5 starters on the offensive line. I mentioned Austin Jackson missing the end of that year. Robert Hunt missed the end of that year. Connor Williams missed the end of that year, torn ACL. Isaiah Wynn with a quad injury missed the end of that year. Teron Armstead, he played variously, but I mean, dude's always playing hurt anyway. Like, we did not have an offensive line going into the last 5-game stretch of that year, and that's why we went from first place in the AFC East and number 1 seed from week 13 to week 17 being like the 7 or 8 seed going into the playoffs. Or 7 or 8 seed. 6 or 7 seed going into the playoffs. Like, that's just what it was. And then the next season, we don't have Connor Williams. We lose Robert Hunt. And we re-signed Isaiah Wynn, but he didn't play until the very end of the season. So, once again, you're talking about a team that just has no offensive line. And Austin Jackson, once again, missed basically the entire season, let's be real. Teron Armstead actually played a lot, but, it just is what it is, because you only have, at that point, 2 offensive linemen that start the year, finish the year. Like, and I know Liam Eichenberg, Robert Jones, like, yeah, they played, but they're not good. They're not good. Out of 76 offensive guards, they were in the 60s with their rating. Like, no, like, that's not gonna cut it. That's not gonna cut it. If you're telling me 30s, I'm like, okay, maybe, but 60s, like, you're telling me that out of 76 offensive guards, qualified offensive guards, you were placed in the 60s? That's insane. Like, no, I don't like it. So, yes, I do think that having them on the hot seat, having them aggressively pursue offensive linemen in this offseason is going to be key to our success. I really do think that if we get 2 good guards, that this offense changes completely. A complete 180, and to me, it's just not even a conversation, because we were competitive with Skylar Thompson against the Buffalo Bills with a decent offensive line in the playoffs a few years ago, like in the snow in the playoffs. And then you fast forward a year and we have Tua, but we have no offensive line, and we get crushed in negative 20-degree weather. Fast forward a year, you have no Tua, you have no offensive line, and you don't make the playoffs. Like, it just is what it is. So maybe, hear me out. Offensive line, no Tua. Tua, no offensive line. No offensive line, no Tua. Tua and offensive line? Hey, just saying, just putting it out there. All right. So that's how I think that they can really thrust us into contenders. Now, how they can castrate us. All right. How they can castrate us, and it's very, very easy to do so, is if they go out and they do sign all these guys or draft all these guys that they think are going to be good, they think are going to be impact players, and they sign them to big money. But guess what? We don't have cap space right now, so we're going to push it down the road. We're going to keep pushing it down the road. We're going to push it down. Everybody's going to be on 3-year contracts down to 2028, and you're going to get $20 million a year. You're going to get $15 million a year. You're going to get $10 million. You're going to get 20. You're going to get 15. And if that's how it goes, and that's how that's how we sign players, and they end up flopping, we're going to be due for their money. So at that point, I actually wouldn't mind. This is being really, really like down under. I wouldn't mind doing what the Texans did before they got D'Amico, and hire a couple of nobodies that, hey, if they do good, whatever. and bring in a good GM to, help draft people and trade away our big guys for more draft capital and build up our youth over a course of a couple years, and then bring on someone that I think is going to be a great head coach. Because the thing is, if you bring on a great head coach right away and you don't have the cap space for 2-3 years to really be competitive, then all you're going to do is have the fan base revolt. You're going to have the fans be like, oh, you need to fire this guy, blah, 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 blah. Then year 4 comes around and boom, you have a great team. Like, I wouldn't mind something like that happening where we have another little reset, but that's if they castrate us. And I think it's going to be the one of the two. I do think that they're either going to be super aggressive and sign guys that actually help us and we do become competitive, because we're not far off. Our defense, meanwhile, it took a little bit to get going. Our defense at the end of the year was pretty dang good. Like, it was pretty darn good. I think we ended up like top 10 in points allowed, top 10 in yards allowed. Turnovers, I don't think were there, but like we led in the categories that were important on defense. Anthony Weaver retained, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips coming back, rotating with Chop Robinson. Like, we do need some safeties. We do need a corner. We do need some linebackers. We needed another defensive lineman to go in there with Zach Sealer. But, I mean, Anthony Weaver did a hell of a job with pretty crappy group, to be honest with you, on defense. So, to have that defense, mostly the same, besides Javon Holland leaving, you're going to have, on the other side, you're going to have new offensive linemen. You're going to bring in whoever. Like, I do see the optimism. I don't want to look at the dark side, but the dark side's there. It is there, and it's screaming at me, and it's like, rah! Like, it's just sitting there like, the Dolphins will disappoint you again. But I'm looking at this light and I'm like, Mike McDaniel has his players love him. The Players Association pool has the Dolphins ranked number 1 in places that players want to be. You have the quarterback. You have the 2-star receivers. Tyreek Hill got his wrist surgery. He's going to be okay for the season. Waddle was, he looks good in his offseason workout so far. Achan's only going to get better in a bigger role. Jalen Wright looked pretty explosive, but behind a bad offensive line. If Patrick Paul looked good. Teron Armstead, if he plays this season, that'll be great. Patrick Paul get another year behind him. Austin Jackson, if he can stay healthy, if this offensive line is there, we have the tools to do what we need to do on offense. On defense, I mean, you played really, really good football with a group of nobodies. Imagine what you can do with a 3-headed monster of Jalen Phillips, Chop Robinson, Bradley Chubb. Like, the tools are there. Anthony Weaver returned. This is the first time you're having, in the Mike McDaniel era, a coach come back for a defensive coordinator in back-to-back seasons. So, dude, I mean, you retained most of your coaching staff besides Wes Welker. Like, this team is either going to be really good or we're going to be miserable for the next 4 years, kind of like we have been for the last 25, but neither here nor there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think that we should have just fired them and reset again? Do you think that I'm kind of right with we need the offensive line and we'll be good? Do you think that Chris Grier just needs to go regardless? Do you think Mike McDaniel needs to go? Because I'm curious about you guys. But yeah, deuces.